think
Gonna buy
there's a
some
single country that actually looks at a homeless person with any self-respect.
gym shorts that cost me $60 each. But after hearing about this $10 shorts deal, I never.
You might be
This
like, I'm
is a-
that guy. There's actually homeless shelters. Shut up, man. How Japan hides their homeless. Chad, we just came from a video of what's it like to be homeless in Japan. Now we're going to how Japan hides their homeless. You know who it is. Let's just get into the video.
graph of homeless
Make sure to like
people
and
in
subscribe.
Japan. Looking at it, it's pretty incredible. For a country of 125 million people, they have less than 5,000 homeless people.
Yeah, the secret is not to have children ever. So if you don't have people, you can't have a lot of homeless people. They beat the odds.
And as of 2024, that number is actually at 2,820.
Boy, they got the North Korean numbers. Talking about no one's
The
poor in
lowest
Japan.
since the data began in 2003. That means just 0.003% of their population is homeless, which means they've basically solved it. It sounds too good to be true, and the reality is that it is. Let me explain.
Hundreds of homeless people in central Tokyo being forced to hide from sight.
These insanely low.
See, that's the United States way of thinking. See, if I don't see it, it's not there.
Low numbers come from the government, and asking any
brain
government
thought.
to report on their own performance is like asking a student to grade their own exam papers. Japan views homelessness differently from other countries. The definition of it isn't really clear. If
Okay, let's see. According to the Special Act regards to the supporting autonomy of homeless population, Japanese kunitashi. Okay, I'm not even going to be racist like that. The term homeless is defined as those who utilize city parks, riverbanks, roads, train stations, and other facilities as their place of stay in order to live their daily lives. The USA defines this. The federal government defines homelessness as a condition in which the individual or family lacks a fixed, regular nighttime residence, resides in a public or private residence that is not designed or intended to be a regular sleeping accommodation for human beings. Okay. Yeah, Japan's definition is like very hyper specific, while the United States definition is more open to interpretation. Like there's like, oh, if you're at a park, a riverbank, roads, train stations, or other facilities as their place to stay in order to live their daily lives. Which could, I feel like you could find areas that are those things but exist out of those, have that definition.
not manipulated. Their actual homelessness rate is very low, which is still amazing, but it's not what it seems. But to understand how Japan brought their homeless rate down to almost nothing, we have to take a look back at the past few decades, when homelessness wasn't even close to 0%.
Damn. Oh yeah. Yeah, when the United States bombed all your homes. So, I guess the homeless population was 100%.
It starts from just after World War II, when the bombings that took place on the mainland left cities severely damaged, making almost 9 million people homeless after the war. At this point, Japan was left with almost nothing. But that all changed when the country went through
Sorry
what
for
has now
yawning,
been
bro.
dubbed the Japanese economic miracle. If you look at this graph here, the rapid economic growth from after the war was basically exponential, propelling it upwards in the ranks of economic power on the international stage. As for how this happened, there's several reasons. Because Japan was in total ruin and lost a chunk of its industries following the war, they really had no other choice but to rebuild from scratch. This was a blessing in disguise, because it gave them the opportunity to innovate while doing so. They didn't have to wait for old technology to run down and slowly cycle in newer tech. Since Japan was in many ways a clean slate, they could launch into it immediately. Japan's imports spiked as they brought in new foreign innovations like robots and machine tools to implement at home. Much of the capital in the nation was dedicated to investing in manufacturing, so multiple industry sectors, from electronics to chemical engineering, grew rapidly. The government was also actively encouraging business growth via maintaining low interest and low tax rates after the war, as it tried to rebuild the country as successfully as possible. The whole idea was to promote aggressive growth in business and industry so the country could bounce back from its defeat. Japan's big businesses formed groups called keiretsu, These large groups connected banks, businesses, and trading companies, and were designed to help corporations outperform their competition. To stay ahead of competition, Keiyaritsus developed a competitive work culture that would keep them one step ahead of their competition. It drove innovation, but also required people in the workforce to work long hours throughout their entire career. So efficiency and productivity.
As much as I was glazing Japan, that's like the main reason I went live in Japan, bro. Like, one is because I'm not trying to learn Japanese. Two is like, I feel like if you go to a country, you gotta learn the language. That's just mandatory. If you go to a country without learning the language, you're kind of a douchebag. I'm not gonna hold you. I'm not kind of, but you are a douchebag. You are a absolute you're an asshole. Like, you're gonna come to whatever country and you're gonna be like, oh, they should learn English. Like, are you like, what are you, Christopher Columbus? Like, whatever. And like, the second reason is their work culture. Like, their work culture is that of absolute hell. You know what I'm saying? Right above hell. I'm not gonna hold you, bro. I'm not gonna hold you. That's like the two main reasons I wouldn't move to Japan. If it wasn't for those two,
activity increased, fueling the rapid business growth Japan.
But I like to move to an area where I feel more like, where I feel more culturally assimilated already.
Was looking for in a post-war world.
Or
even though its
like
imports grew on the front end,
easily.
The drive toward more production led Japan's exports to explode not long after. Japan was flexible in what it exported, bending to what was most in demand at the time, whether that was metals, textiles, or something else. Because of this flexibility coupled with the efficiency of their labor force, Japan became a notable exporter and a player on the international economic stage in just a matter of decades. By the 1980s, Japan had the largest gross national product in the world. Even now, Japan is the third largest economy in the world, with a GDP of $4.2 trillion. During the Japanese economic miracle, it served everyone very well, so the homelessness rate naturally declined in the 1960s and on, as companies needed more workers and both employees and businesses reaped the economic benefits. But as with all economic booms, the growth couldn't last forever. The good economic fortune of the 1980s was due in part to Japan's loose monetary policy. The lax regulations led to an inflated stock market and real estate valuations. This was great while it lasted, but it was clear an economic bubble was forming, so the Japanese Financial Ministry raised interest rates. But in the early 1990s, it burst. The stock market crashed.
Hello? Huh? Okay. Alright, let's get back into the video.
And this ushered in a debt crisis that would become known as the Lost Decade. A long 10 years of severe economic struggle and stagnation for Japan. The GDP plummeted. This inevitably led to higher unemployment rates, which inevitably led to high homeless rates. By 2003, there were about 25,000 homeless people on the streets of Japan. But the last decade didn't just stop by the early 2000s. Its GDP continued to stay extremely low, and then the financial crisis of 2008 hit, crushing the global economy even more, which crushed Japan even more. So their economy has been relatively stagnant for the past 3 decades. And yet, at the same time, homelessness hasn't steadily grown over those decades. In fact, it has decreased. So if the answer isn't economic growth, how has Japan reduced its homeless population to almost nothing? Well, things started changing at the governmental level in the late 1990s, when homeless groups and advocates began to grow more vocal. Tokyo, Japan's capital, started to take notice of these advocates and groups and listen to their concerns. This became especially important because, at the time, the homeless issue was growing rapidly in the country, with thousands considered homeless in Tokyo alone. Many struggled to find permanent employment, and wages were often low, which made it difficult for Japanese people to support themselves. Day laborers especially struggled with finding affordable housing during the last decade. Many homeless people were from blue-collar industries, such as construction, which suffered greatly during the decades of economic stagnation in Japan. Homelessness plagued middle-aged and elderly people more often, as they struggled to find work as they were replaced with younger laborers. These groups began to organize and push back against the government, advocating for their rights. So finally, in 2002, the ball started rolling. The government passed the Homeless Self-Support Act, which was designed to help homeless people reach a point where they could support themselves. As part of the new legislation, Tokyo created self-help support centers to help those who were homeless find employment and become capable of supporting themselves. The homeless policy of the 2000s involved several other aspects, all aimed at discouraging street life and encouraging self-help for the homeless population. The idea wasn't to just get them off the streets temporarily. The government wanted to get people off the streets permanently. The next big pillar of
I feel like that's a good thing. I feel like most United States problems are what they view as like temporary issues. A lot of and for some reason in the United States they have this very much pull yourself by the bootstrap mentality. And what they do is they cut your laces and then they take your shoes and they give you flip-flops, and then they take those flip-flops and they leave you barefoot. Like, they give you absolutely no laces to pull yourself up by. They say make the shoe, get the laces, and then pull yourself up by them.
It's like, it's so weird here. Like, the government rarely does things to actually like want to help people without trying to benefit monetarily from it. When actually helping people will give you in the long term a monetary benefit. They don't see it long term, they see it temporary. Like, oh, they're homeless, well, they didn't work hard enough. It's like, damn.
Of Tokyo's policy was to find accommodations for the homeless people who could no longer live on the streets since they were evicted from the sidewalks and public places. Tokyo offered both rehabilitation facilities and simple accommodation facilities for temporary housing for homeless
Oh wow, bro. Look at this. And this actually looks decent, bro.
people. From 2004 to 2007, it implemented a project that offered homeless people with housing for low rent that they could occupy for a certain period of time. Non-profits, often loosely backed by the government, also provided welfare facilities to help homeless people. So, from 1998 to 2010, the total number of housing facilities for homeless people in Tokyo increased by 6 times, while the capacity of these facilities as a whole grew by 2.5 times.
Okay.
Around the end of the 2000s, Tokyo implemented more new measures for their welfare system. A new support system known as self-help supporting housing was added to the mix, which was a sublease housing system that was supposed to act as another intermediate for people between homelessness and permanent housing. Then there's the actual laws and institutions that play a role. They have a no-nonsense drug policy. The government strictly enforces its policy against illegal drugs and discourages their use. So, as of 2014, only about 1.6% of the Japanese population, via a survey, was found to have tried drugs other than alcohol at some point in their life. This number pales in comparison to the number of people who have tried some form of illegal drug.
Yeah, United States is a bunch of drug addicts.
No one, like, dude. United States is a bunch of drug addicts, man. I feel like it also has to do with geography. Like, United States has, like, I don't know, Japan is just an island, bro. I feel like it's somewhat easier to regulate drugs coming in. This, United States is actually a
drug in the US, which is above 50% of the population. This illegal drug use
It's
can
more
often
like
lead
70,
to addiction,
80.
a criminal record, or mental health issues that ends up making it way harder to function or get a job to re-enter society, creating one big cycle. This is especially the case
United States, we stuck in that cycle, bro. We stuck in that rent cycle. They
in
have us in
Japan.
the cycle.
If you were accused once of even a tiny drug possession, your life would absolutely be over in Japan. Society never forgets what
basically what they do to you in the United States, bro. Dude, you do one crime when you're like 15, your life is done. You might as well restart character.
you did, and your crime record never leaves. So housing or job searching is almost impossible for the rest of your life. As for how Japan deals with mental health issues, it's a bit ironic, given their high unaliving rates and stigma of mental health. But they surprisingly deal with it well for the homeless population, kinda. Over 30% of all people who experience homelessness at some point around the globe have struggled with a mental illness. Unlike other countries that might just put an individual with a mental health issue in an ordinary homeless shelter.
Yeah! United States, look at their lip. Who wouldn't want to live here? Boy, it looks like an absolute prison camp, Mike G. I knew homeless shelters in the United States were shit, bro. Any like publicly offered government funded shit in the United States is often a piece of fucking shit, dude. It's often like and when you see homeless people be like, nah, I'd rather sleep on the streets than be in the homeless shelter, how about you fix the fucking homeless shelter? Because there's an obvious problem that people are seeing when you have
literally the people that you're supposed to accommodate saying, no, I'd rather live on the streets than live in a fucking homeless shelter. How about you fix the fucking homeless shelter so it doesn't look like an open-air prison? Like, holy shit. Who is supposed to find this comfortable?
Or facility, Japan moves those struggling with mental illness to a mental health facility.
It's like a fucking warehouse and you put beds every fucking where. Doesn't matter where, you just throw a bed here, throw a bed there, throw a bed there. Oh, look at that, it's a homeless shelter. It's like, what?
Simply have more space available. In Japan, there's 269 beds in mental health facilities per 100,000 people, while the rest of the world has an average of 68. This is
Rest of the world? Yeah!
because, for better or worse, they've lagged behind everyone else in the deinstitutionalization trend, which is the process of replacing long-stay psychiatric hospitals with less isolated community mental health services for those diagnosed with mental health issues. So, Japan's practice of institutionalizing those exhibiting signs of mental illness has helped reduce its homeless population out in the streets, but it doesn't equate to the best mental health care. But aside from all the efforts on the government's part to find housing arrangements for the homeless people in the country, there's some other reasons for the lack of homelessness that stem more from a purely cultural aspect than anything else. See, the Japanese government has received a lot of criticism from groups which claim that the number of homeless people in the country is much higher than the amounts reported by the government.
How about you go and count
This would
them?
make their nearly 0% homeless rate a lot less impressive. But why wouldn't the government's count be accurate? Is the government intentionally skewing the numbers?
Yes.
Well, perhaps not intentionally, but yes. There's a few legal, social, and cultural reasons that
No, they're purposely skewing the numbers. Dude, why you think, like, people think Japan is just anime land and, like, good land? Like, bro, of course, if a government were to be like, oh, hey, random government, can you report how many homeless people you have so we understand, like, so, I don't know, for some fucking odd reason, so we can report it and some random high school kid can write a report on it for some fuck. And they're going to be like, oh, yeah, 1, 2, 0. All right, we have 0 homeless people. Like, who wouldn't do that? Who the fuck wouldn't?
this could be happening. First, we have to take a look at how Japan legally defines homelessness. The definition is much narrower than the definition we might use for what it means to be homeless. The Japanese government defines it as people who live everyday life in public spaces, such as roads, parks, riversides, etc. So they're only counting people who literally live on the street, and not those in homeless shelters and facilities, who technically are
Banger.
without a home. And in Japan, people living on the street is a rarity because of the forced evictions from public spaces common in Japan. The country
Banger.
locks homeless people out of parks, builds anti-homeless architecture, and
Oh,
removes them
yeah, baby. Oh, yeah, baby. Taking a good note from the United States playbook. What? You're homeless, so we're gonna make it impossible for you to live, and that will fix your homelessness. When you figure out the streets are not a good place to live, you're gonna go to the bank, pull out a loan, buy a house, and then get a job. Like, dead ass. Like, homelessness is a fucking choice.
from public areas. So the numbers of people on the
Red
streets,
pill
or
Japan.
those who count as homeless in the eyes of the government, is very low. So where do all these hidden, undetected homeless people end up? Well, it's become common for some people without permanent residences to sleep in 24-hour cyber cafes. If they have part-time, low-paying jobs, they can cover the nightly cost of staying there while also staying off the streets by sleeping in computer cubicles at these cafes. At these
W.
places, they can receive a small space to sleep as well as access to the internet. These people are called
Dude, we seen that in the last video, bro. It's actually pretty nice.
internet cafe refugees. It's such a big thing that many cyber cafes now essentially double up as a hospitality business by offering food, drinks, and a shower to people who come to pay and stay.
You know what the United States people you know what the United States we would do if we found out homeless people were using internet cafes? We would shut down the internet cafes or make homeless architecture inside. We would somehow make we would somehow make it as least hospitable to life occurring there as possible, especially if we could somehow target homeless people. We would probably be like, oh, we need a proof of residence before you come inside. Like, you know how that's how fucked up people here are.
Gradually, this trend trend has developed into a flourishing industry. Since 2020, it's been estimated that a minimum of 15,000 individuals reside in cybercafes in Tokyo alone, which is 5 times the official number of homeless people in Japan. This choice of shelter is especially popular among the younger homeless population. For context, in the official governmental count, almost all of the homeless people counted were over the age of 50. So this doesn't mean that most homeless people are old, it just means that younger homeless people aren't as easy to distinguish as homeless. They often bounce around between internet cafes, friends' homes, and 24-hour fast food restaurants. Now, you might be wondering why people would go to internet cafes rather than homeless shelters, especially since spending money to stay at these cafes night after night could add up for someone who's already low on funds as it was. Well, this leads me to what I really meant about the culture of Japan towards homelessness. There's absolutely no culture of compassion for homeless people in Japan, but rather never-ending shame, which leads a lot of Japanese homeless people to lose touch or cut ties with their friends and family to avoid embarrassment. Japanese culture is centered largely around self-reliance and hard work, so homeless people are often viewed as lazy, with no one else to blame but themselves. Oftentimes, other citizens even avoid looking at them, viewing them as an embarrassment. It's seen as a threat to a harmonious society in Japan.
Damn, Japan, who are you? The United States, bro? Who are you? The rest of the world? Holy shit.
And as something that impedes on the beauty of cities like Tokyo. For these reasons, homeless people make a lot of effort to not appear homeless to others. For example, they'll rarely beg for money, if not take offense to it when offered, try to keep clean, and look well by using the many public restrooms and wash areas across the country. When homeless people...
Dude, it is so fucked up. It is so fucked up. So people can treat you like a decent human being, that you have to pretend to be something else. You know what I'm saying? Like, dead ass, bro. Dead ass. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Are actually living on the streets, they set up their shelters along remote locations, such as riverbanks, to stay out of everyone's way. When they do,
I'm gonna inconvenience myself. I'm already fucking homeless as it is. But so you don't have to look at my homelessness, I'm gonna go and live on the fucking... I'm gonna live in the water, bro. I'm gonna live in the fucking ocean. So you don't have to look at my homelessness. Cause it's such... You know how privileged and fucking of an asshole you have to be? And this is my thing with homeless architecture and things. Oh, I don't want to look at it. Like it's a stinky pile of trash in the middle of the fucking street. This is not aesthetically pleasing. This is not Demore. This is not Sigma. This is not, like, bro, are you joking? I want you to live in the fucking water. I want you to live in the ocean, because you're not aesthetically pleasing. You're bringing down the property value.
You have to sleep in high traffic locations. They often pack up their belongings and remove themselves from such a location during peak hours. Shinjuku Central Park is a prime example of how this works. The stigma is especially strong for men, who make up over 90% of the nation's homeless population. Japanese culture dictates that
men, women, unknown. What the fuck you got in Japan? Tentacle monsters? What the fuck is unknown? What the fuck? Boy, you got some space aliens up in there?
Women are supposed to be cared for, so there's less stigma around women who are homeless because it is not viewed as their fault. So they are more likely...
Man, you're homeless and people are like, man, it's not your fault. You're a woman. You're a woman. It's also the misogyny in that culture too, bro. You're a woman. You barely know. You can't even drive, bro. You can't even drive. How's it gonna be your fault? How's it gonna be? You can't work, my G. You're not capable of such a task. Undergoing such a task.
Likely to receive help. On the other hand, homeless men are stereotyped to have become so running away from gambling debts, so they are less likely to receive the same help.
Oh, because all homeless people gamble. Okay.
This negative view of homelessness makes many people keep it a secret if they can, which leads to a worsening problem that no one's really aware of. But homelessness became more obvious in 2020 during the pandemic, when alternatives to homeless shelters, like 24-hour internet cafes, shut down. The government had to pivot.
Homeless shelters shut down? To
avoid having many more people suddenly sleeping on the streets. So it invested in several thousand rooms at hotels around Tokyo during the pandemic state of emergency. If the government hadn't done this, there likely would have been a major spike in how they perceive homeless people. As of now, Tokyo has long-term shelters similar to dorms throughout the city, largely run by non-profits. But these facilities have negative reputations, like being run down, overcrowded, and having little privacy. Japan doesn't
www. Just get a bunch of beds and throw it in a warehouse, bro.
support one-night
Call
shelters
it a
when people
homeless
can
shelter.
come and receive shelter for just one night. Instead, the government prefers to offer long-term shelter so they can help people get to a place where they can support themselves. In recent years, Japan has also become more flexible in offering government money to homeless people who need it. Although they
Oh yeah, United States will never do that shit. Never do that shit, bro. We have oh damn.
I won't say they'll never do it. It'll just take a. Don't we do have something like this, but it's not towards homeless people. Not directly towards homeless
livelihood
people.
protection program has been around since the 2000s to provide homeless people with money if they have no assets or family to fall back on. The requirements used to be more stringent. People used to have to prove that their family was incapable of supporting them, which led to a lot of people not applying for the program because they didn't want their family to know that they were homeless. Now that requirement can be waived. Through the program, homeless people can receive about 53,700 yen, or about $448 per month, which can be used for apartment rent or for government-funded shelters, and about 75,000 yen, or $621 for living expenses. Beyond that, the government now offers Independence Support Centers, which provide job searching support for the unemployed. So Japan has used legislation to reduce homelessness rates, but the amount of hidden homelessness likely means there's a lot more work to be done. In fact, Japan has a higher poverty rate than the United States, with about 15% of the Japanese population considered impoverished, compared to about only 12% of Americans living in poverty, which of course seems like a contradiction to the low reported homeless rates. Perhaps the most important thing for Japan to do is to start changing the stigma around homelessness, since the stigma
That's what the
deters a
world
lot
needs
of
to do. That's what the world needs to do.
Change the stigma around homelessness. I mean, being poor is not synonymous with being homeless. You can have no money and
people
have a
who are
home.
struggling from seeking help. Making people view and treat homelessness as less shameful could encourage more participation in government programs with a better
Oh man, I wish we could change the world.
output. Regardless,
All right, chat. Thank you, man.
Thank you for joining me. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe, like, and share the video. You know what to do. Come on, man.